Hello and welcome to the next game, Centauri Saga. This is a very fun game. I really am happy that I have this game and I discovered it. Most people I talk to have never even heard of this game or aren't even aware that it exists. I think it gets some controversy because there's a 1.0 version of this that apparently it had some issues. This is 1.5. And the first thing I want to start with is if you want to buy a game like this, they sell it to you with the 1.0 box. And then you get a 1.5 upgrade kit. So plan to spend about an hour or so sorting through components and discarding the ones that are being replaced. And it's not fun. I just put it that way. They don't give you a super good guide on obviously you can look at the card and see, yep, this is the new card and that's the old card, but you have to go through all of it and quite thoroughly because I'm always paranoid when I'm just throwing away components, right? So, to make sure it's right, there's a lot you have to go through. And then something even crazier is there's this boss called the Black Carrier, okay? It's this one right here. That Black Carrier there, they give you an upgrade card, but you're not supposed to use it. Just go back to your 1.0 version of it. I honestly compared the two cards. It's not that big of a difference between the two, but anyways, it gets a little crazy. Now, the next thing is this is a 4-player game. This is a co-op game. I forgot to mention that. It's a co-op space war game, and it's got scenarios in it. So the co-op part, of course, is awesome because, there's an AI built in, and it, of course, means you can solo. And it actually has special solo rules that makes the co-op part even easier. Because normally in a co-op game, if you solo it, you're controlling multiple characters, and they're just working together, and you're just making all the decisions. This actually has a pure solo mode where you are only controlling one character per se, and yet it still allows you to play it as if it's a co-op. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more, because there's pros and cons to controlling 2 players versus doing a solo, which lets you control 2 ships. I mean, that's really what it does. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself there. There is a 5 and 6 player expansion. I do not have that. I do not need it. I do not have 5 or 6 players that will play this game with me. Now, the 1.5 upgrade kit will come with 5 and 6 player expansion components. So that will confuse you. So you'll have like all these things and you're like, what are these? And it's for the 5th and 6th player. And then one other important thing to point out is that there is a Centauri Saga Legacy expansion, and the words will be yellow on the box. And I do have that, and I am super excited about that. If you've ever played Pandemic Legacy, it has all the things that you expect. It has tuck boxes that can't be opened until, such and such thing is meant. It's got stickers. It has, I don't know if you destroy components, but it's got stickers, and you write on the components, you get out a marker. It's got all of that. And one of the things that this game did, or the designers did, that I wish every Legacy designer would do, is this base game does not get changed. All the components that you're going to write on, destroy, or otherwise modify are included in the expansion pack. So you can put away the expansion pack and your base game is completely untouched. And it's still pristine and you can play it just like you always could. And in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're playing the base game completely untouched. And I could do 3 Legacy scenarios, and they're just, all the components are just separate. And it still uses these rules. It has extra rules, of course, and the rules keep changing based on your decisions. But it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And I think it's one of the most brilliant Legacy attempts I've seen so far. And I know that guy, Rob Deveau, because he's sort of the pioneer of it, gets all the accolades. But I really think that these guys, this Konstantin Kevork, he took Rob's idea and mastered it, to be quite frank. And I think Rob could learn a thing or two from what this guy did. But that's not to say Rob's still not the genius that he is. It's just, I really think that what these guys did is what Rob should do in his future games. Okay, with that being said, this isn't a 10 out of 10 game. This is a lighter game. Compared to the 18OE series I just did, the rules and the strategy behind this are so much simpler. Now, the rules, on the other hand, though, they're scattered. They're all here, but they're scattered. And there's a couple that you do have to interpret. And I think the interpretation's not that hard to do, but you do have to stop and think about it. And there's a few spots that I always get hung up on. But anyways, I'm going to try to help you through it. And the one thing I will say is that the rules for the 1.5 were, upgraded based on feedback. There's still a few confusing parts if you're a brand new player to the series or to the game. This is sort of like the DVG games where they assume you've played other leader games or whatever. There's some things that can be confusing, and I'll help you through that. But let me show you the game and the setup, and then we can get started. And there's 7 scenarios to this game. And we're going to start with the first scenario, which is called Fixing the Jump Gate. And yes, I have the rulebook open in front of me and the scenario book, and we're going to keep them that way. But for now, let me just show you the game. First of all, the most important part of the game is you. And that's every player gets one of these boards. And this board will have several things. You can have a commander, that's in charge. That's you. And then you have like a cargo section for holding your things. And then you have, these are your stats for your armada. So you have what's called strength, shields, and speed. And we can talk about what those do in a second. And then you have your hull damage, or your hull. So obviously if the hull goes to 0, you're destroyed. Then you have what are called upgrades, or power-ups, if you will. There's unit power-ups, so you have units that are, in your armada. And then you have what's simply called a power-up, and there's 3 of those. Now these cards, what you do is you select a player color. So we are going to be orange. And I have a yellow one there, and I'll explain why in a second. But we're going to be orange, and so if you're orange, you take the orange cards. And then you're going to see that there's a picture of the unit, and then there's another picture of these. There should be 10 of each, I think. And so, anyways, all the orange cards are yours. And so there's just one set of cards. They all say the exact same thing, and they're for each player. So there is no unique difference from one color to the next. They're all exactly the same, but you're going to have these cards, and as you may have guessed, these cards will go onto the various power-up spots. Now, you also have what I would call like level ups. So you can level up your research lab, you can level up your starport, and then your command center levels up as well. And all 3 of these lead to bonuses. So each of these pictures you see here is a bonus you're going to receive for getting that level up. And then you get even more bonuses on the bottom. So all kinds of cash and prizes for leveling up in this game. And as you may have noticed, I love leveling up. And most of the games I play have leveling up in it. So this is another one that has that, except it's space and it's combat and it's wonderful. Okay, so now backing up, you're going to have some pilot cards. I showed you one of them. And so these pilot cards, just set them aside. Every player is going to pick one of these. Next, you're going to have, obviously, your components, which are your ships. And then you're going to have these reference cards. They're double-sided. So one side says Raiders and has statistics about Raiders. You definitely need one of those in order to play this game. It has valuable information on it. And then on the other side is a description of your game round. This is very helpful, but this is where the rules sort of confuse you. There's hidden rules that aren't listed on this game round chart. And that's the part that gets me hung up sometimes. You're going through the game round chart and then you forget about those hidden rules. Okay, and then of course there's one of these for each player. So I happen to have 6 of them because, even though I don't have the 6-player upgrade. Now, it comes with miniatures, And everything that's red are enemy bosses. And there's a whole type. And then, of course, the big mega boss is this looking thing. He's pretty cool. And they're, they're not high quality miniatures. They're plastic, but you don't have to assemble them any more than just putting this base on. But they're very functional and they work fine. You do get a colony ship, which is used for some scenarios. I have never played that scenario yet, so I can't tell you anything more about it, but just set it aside. You're going to have a bunch of tokens. We'll get into what those are, sort those out. Then these are the bandits, or enemy raiders, if you will. Level 1, level 2, level 3. These have, that's a combat token, and I don't know if it's easy to see, but it looks like it's basically a ground turret. And then there's exploration tokens, which they look like satellite dishes. Okay, these are they're resources in the game, and you collect those, and they give you cash and prizes. Usually, most scenarios require you to get a lot of these. These are very, very valuable. Then you have these little lightning bolt tokens, and what they are is those are action points. And this is going to be confusing, but when it's your turn, you get to take actions, right? You get to move, you get to attack, whatever. This lets you trigger special abilities. I think that's the better way to put it. It's not an action point, it's a special ability trigger. So you may have a card that has a special ability on it, and the only way you can trigger that special ability is to spend one of these tokens. Now, what's interesting about this game is when you spend one of these tokens, every round you get them all back. So let's say you are a captain, you get 3 of these, because the number of these you get is based on your card and actually your command center. That's what this is. Your command center, see these little lightning bolts? That's telling you you get another one of these to your cargo. So if I'm a player and I get one of these, then I use it to do something. At the end of the round, when we go to the next upkeep phase, I get them all back. And so basically every round, it's a use it or lose it policy. So it's just like vacation days on most companies. You have them, so you might as well use them because you're going to get them back at the end of the round. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But these are very, very handy, and a large mechanic in the game and I think most of the fun in the game is figuring out a good combination on how to use these. Now, you're going to see some lightning bolts with the yellow or orange background. This is for solo mode, and only for solo mode. And so you're actually going to get to see it because we're going to play the solo mode rules, which I've never done before. So we're going to figure that out together. And you only use these for solo mode, and I'll explain why they are a different color in a second. Then you're going to have, those sets of cards. Those are for the other player colors. So there's a yellow player color, a green player color, a blue. And so just set those aside. They're out of the game if you're only playing one player. These are space stations. So you just see that I have them tucked away back there. But the space stations do have colors on them. And I know they match the player colors, but please do not think that they are specific to a player. They are not. Although usually if the blue player builds one, we put a blue space station out there. It's a co-op game. Everybody gets to use the space stations. I think there's one scenario that they said that you needed the colors, and that's the reason why they're different colors. Otherwise, they could have been gray. Okay, moving on. You're going to have a stack of tiles. So you're going to just want to shuffle those and have them ready. That's how we explore space. Almost every mission starts with what they call a New Dawn space, and it's just basically a planet and then a jump gate. Because apparently we jumped into Alpha Centauri, and we just arrived in Alpha Centauri at this planet, and then of course all kinds of crap is happening once we get there. Okay, you're gonna have these. These are what I would call exploration cards, and they're gonna have when you do exploration, you're gonna have challenges you need to solve or resolve, and if you do, you get cash and prizes, and if you don't, you just cry. These are reward cards. So this is some of those cash and prizes I was talking about. And they're going to give you various bonuses that are usually rule breaking, or some of them are instant, some of them are use them at specific times of the game. These are more cash and prizes, but apparently like elite. So those are considered common rewards, and these are I don't even remember what they're called, but they're not common. Let's just put it that way. And they're a lot better. So you can see, like, this one's giving you a bonus during the expand phase of the game, and you get to reduce the starbase cost of a starbase by 1 exploration and 1 combat, and that is actually quite awesome. So anyways, moving on. These cards, just set them aside. They are literally just colors. So sometimes you need to randomize a color, right? So you're just going to shuffle these cards, draw one, and it'll be red. And then the AI will do something based on the fact that you drew a red, okay? This first scenario won't even use these cards. These cards with the question mark are also AI cards. They're going to have a pattern on them, and that pattern will mean something for the scenario you're doing. Again, not used in scenario 1. And I've never played anything other than scenario 1 of this game. So if we play more than just scenario 1, you're going to be discovering this game right alongside me. So that part's cool. Those cards, by the way, I've never used them. So just set them aside. For scenario 1, they do ask you to take the black hole out of the pile. And these are considered to be nebula. And they're pretty easy to identify. They have this nebula picture. And there's one for each color. We'll talk about what the colors mean later. And you set those aside. These you do use in a scenario. So they're special. You set them aside. I don't think we use these at all, this one at all in this scenario. So I'm just going to put it on the bottom. Okay. It gives you a generic doom counter. Since it's a co-op game, you need some kind of pressure to win the game within a certain amount of time. So you move the doom counter along, and almost every scenario is 10 turns. That is for a generic scenario, and I have no idea when it's used, but every scenario has its own card. So like this is a 1-player Lost Starbases scenario. And so there's a whole bunch of those. Just set those aside. The one you're going to need for our game is fixing the jump gate. That's the first scenario we're going to do. And you can see they're double-sided, and this is for 2 players, and this one is for 1 player. And we're going to do the 1-player version. And yes, you can see there's a 10-turn timer. So we got to win the scenario within 10 turns. And it actually tries to tell you that this will take about an hour to play. So pretty cool. And we'll get into what these symbols mean whenever we get there. But this controls the AI as well. And actually, it's what pressures you to move your butt. These are random cards that are, you shuffle them and you're going to draw one every turn, and it's going to dictate how the enemy moves and where things appear on the map. Fixing the jump gate has special cards that come with the scenario. These are only used for this scenario. Just shuffle them, set them aside. These are the bad cards. You never want to see these cards. They're event cards that happen to you, and they are never, ever good. So shuffle those and put, voodoo hexes on them or whatever, and say, don't go away, I don't want to see you. And then this is just a randomizer, because when bosses appear in the game, it's random which boss you get. So it's not always a specific boss. So you just shuffle these and you draw one, and that tells you which boss you're going to encounter. There are more things. There are these cards. They have that on the back. This is for a specific scenario, not the one we're doing, so set them aside. And then they give you a colony ship card, which we don't have the colony ship. And then this Ravager Retaliation scenario has its own cards that we're not going to use. Okay, so with that being said, if you put those 2 tiles out like so, you put your ships on the tiles, and then you're off and ready to go to start the game. Now, the scenarios book has a goal, and then it has extra setup you have to do, and then it has like during this step, there's a step called Ravager Retaliation. I know you don't know that, but there's a step in the game called this. There's special rules for that. There are special rules for when you do encounters. And then there are times when raiders need to move. And then there's special rules around that. Every scenario is going to be different, so you have to study the scenario sheet before you start, and that's going to dictate how things happen. And what I'm going to do is I am going to do this like I do most games. I do give you a nice overview before we start, but I prefer just starting and then explaining the rules as we go. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I know this was a short intro. Welcome to Centauri Saga. I'm going to take a quick break because my dog is going to start barking. And then when we come back, what we'll do is we'll create a new character, and I'll talk about the difference between controlling two characters versus just playing the solo mode. And I am completely torn on which one's the better way to go. I think controlling two characters gives you more power, and it's going to make the game easier. I think the solo mode is actually harder. But from a fiddly perspective, like the number of components you have to manage and how much your brain's going to hurt, the solo is like, it's streamlined. It's so simple compared to controlling two players. So there's the pros and cons. I just wish I could play solo and not feel like the game got harder because of it. Anyways, we will talk about that when I get back. Thank you all for watching. This is Centauri Saga.